Today we're going to talk about the most common violations that you'll see out there on an inspection. Whether you're going out with a fire company or whether you are a full-time fire inspector, these are things you're going to see almost every time. Every once in a while you'll hear about a fire crew that they get all of their inspections done, and every single one of them was considered reasonably fire safe. Well, that's a fire crew that's not doing their job. In fact, I knew some guys that would drive by, look at a building, and say, "Yeah, we did fire prevention there." That's not having integrity, like we talked about a while ago. So we're going to look at these common violations. This is going to be a quick one. I'd be surprised if this is even a half hour long. So let's jump in there and talk about all of these kinds of common violations. We're going to look at the different parts. Here's our objectives. Describe inspecting occupancy access, occupancy egress and exiting systems. That's one of the top killers. Okay, that is very important. Make sure exits aren't blocked, all of those kind of things. Maintenance of fire barriers, electrical hazards, flammable liquid hazards, housekeeping, all of these kind of things, and cooking equipment and commercial is needs to be properly maintained. So we're going to look at all those. Well, before we look at the specifics, we kind of need to know that even if you are not someone who's worked in fire prevention, have a lot of experience, some of this is just common sense. Using your head when you go out there, and if you're thinking safety instead of just walking through a place, it's amazing how many things you see that you go, "Oh, that's not a good idea." You know, common sense things, right? Like wearing your helmet when you ride your bike. Yeah, you can ride your bike almost your whole life and never get in an accident. But if you do get in an accident, you're going to be very, very happy that you wore your helmet. So there are three types of fire hazards: unsafe behavior, where people are doing things in a way that's not smart. On one of my film jobs, I was watching a guy who was painting some of the set dressing, and he was on a very high A-frame ladder. I'd say he was 20 to 22 feet up in the air, and he needed to move. And instead of walking down to the bottom of his ladder, moving the ladder, he kind of went to the top of it. He grabbed two of the rungs and he made the ladder hop over to the side. I ran over there and said, "What the heck are you doing?" And he says, "I do this all the time." And I says, "Well, you might get away with it 500 times. But the one time that it doesn't work and this ladder collapses, you're going to have a cracked skull." So unsafe behavior, unsafe conditions, and hazardous processes, like flammable liquids that were moving from one container to another container, or things like that. Hazardous processes we're going to look at in chapter 10. You're going to see a lot of the less common but very hazardous things that happen in businesses, places like where they store used tires and lots of lumber and things like that. The huge fires if they catch on fire. So hazardous processes. So the first thing, as we're pulling up, remember, whenever you're doing an inspection, you want to look at things from the outside before you even go in. Is there an address? Are the fire lanes clear? Is all the fire protection equipment properly maintained and clear? So we want to make sure that there's good access. The fire department, if we need to pull into this driveway or to this fire lane, we want to make sure that fire engines can get through. So we want to compare the current condition with previous inspections and make sure proper access is there. So check the fire lanes. As you can see here, uh, product has been stored in front of, can you see it there right in the middle of the picture? That's the fire department connection. So I recently saw a picture on a firefighter Facebook page where some guys pulled up to a fire and there was a car parked in front of the hydrant. And they did just like in the movie Backdraft. They broke both the windows and put the hose right through the car so that they could get to the hydrant. I thought that was pretty funny. But we really don't want to hassle those kind of things. Keep it clear. Keep the fire lane clear. Keep the fire equipment clear. And of course, we want to make sure that the address is legible. And as we talked about before, it needs to be legible from the street in a contrasting color. If this is the kind of place that needs a key box, it needs to be in a place that's, so we want the address very visible. We want the key box not so visible. We want it kind of off to the side. We don't want people noticing it. It's there for us to use and nobody else. If there's any dead ends in the fire lane, then they need to be the proper kinds of dead ends. So we have ways for fire trucks to turn around. If we pull in, we have to be able to get out. So these three pictures are showing us the hammerhead type of dead end, the cul-de-sac type of dead end. And if you have a cul-de-sac like that, it has to be able to handle the truck. The truck needs to be able to pull a U-turn there. So, and then lastly, there's the alley dock dead end. So, you come across things like this, a PIV and an FDC that are covered up. So we want to look for obstructions to hydrants, fire department equipment, and again, as we said, addresses and key boxes. Let's look at this picture. Address. We want it visible from the street. Is that address in the right-hand picture visible? Barely. If you were walking by, sure, but if you are driving by, the name of their company is very visible, but not the address. And we go by the address. So we want it very conspicuous. But see that picture on the left? We want the Knox box to be inconspicuous, off to the side. Maybe if there's a little column or a pilaster, put it on the back side of that. Here's a great example of a visible address. I mean, that's super visible, right? White on dark red, very big letters. That's the way we want. Color contrasting to the background. The bigger, the better. We also want to make sure that we're watching for the means of egress for people inside. This is one of our most critical things that we need to be watching for. File cabinets in the middle of the hallway, even chairs, desks, things like that get in front of doorways. This is essential, and we got to get conformance to the code. This is critical for life safety. In fact, egress problems are something that we need to require them to fix while we're there. As often as possible. If it's going to require moving a lot of stuff, we might tell them this needs to be done today. You need to get somebody on it while I'm here. You shouldn't leave with an exit blocked or locked. So the occupants have to be able to evacuate. And also watch for change of occupancy classifications, where a place that was, in a strip mall was a set of offices, and now they've taken 2 offices and converted them into restaurants. Make sure they've got adequate egress and that's been changed and that the building official has looked at it. We want to look for blocked exits, locked exits. I would not leave this business until that chain was gone. I want it unchained and I want the chain taken off. because you cannot chain exit doors. And, they'll argue with you. They'll say that we have a security problem. Take care of your security problem a different way. You cannot lock your people in. So all exit doors must be operable from the inside. They can be locked from the outside, but not from the inside. All exit doors need to be swinging in the right direction. Are they, if they have 50 or more, they have to swing towards the direction of travel. And we need to make sure that exit doors aren't, roll top doors can't be considered exit doors. So look for exit problems. Here's a couple of more examples, or one more example. This has a double lock, has a knob and a lock. You can't have that. It has to be single action. So blocked exits, locked exits, single action locks. These are things we want to make sure that we look for. Remember that exception, though, that we talked about in assembly type places. We can allow them to put a deadbolt if they have the sign above, this door to remain unlocked during business hours. Look for special knowledge exits. This is a big problem with daycares and senior centers. There is an exception for special knowledge locks, but it's called delayed egress, but these are only allowed to be used in places like Alzheimer's care, things of that nature. So what you're seeing here, the picture there with, some Swami, where it says exit, there's some guy's picture there, Swami something, somebody's idol. But right below the picture of the man, there's this big silver thing. That is a magnetic lock. And when I objected, they said, oh, everybody knows how to use it. And I says, well, how do you get out of here? See that red button over there? You got to push that red button. Well, first of all, you could barely see the red button because there was so much stuff in the way. Secondly, that's called a special knowledge lock. You got to know to hit the red button before you hit the panic hardware. That's not allowed, and we required that they remove it, and it had to be taken down. That was, again, at Hippie Central, Cal Arts. This is Cal Arts also. In fact, the next picture is as well. This is an amazing painting, right? You're saying painting? No, that's a photograph. Well, it's a photograph and a painting. See the exit sign down about midway down the hallway. That's the end of the hallway. The rest of that is a painting on the wall. It was so amazing the first time I saw it. I was standing there going, wow, I didn't know this building was that long. And the facilities manager said, no, Randy, it's smoke and mirrors. It's all a trick. And we walked down, and when you got closer, even then, it was kind of hard to tell. It wasn't until we were right on top of it that I realized this was a painting on the wall. Now, that is a deception to exits. But it was such a good deception, I didn't want to make them paint over it. So I required that they make the exit sign clear, and I think that we put one down on the ground or something like that. I forget what all we did, but I did allow the painting to stay. It's very important, though, that you can tell the painting or the exit from what's around it. And you'll see in the next picture how that's so pertinent. This is the basement at Cal Arts. They allow the students to graffiti the walls at this level. And the students do all of this. Some of it's really amazing. Some of it's kind of creepy. But before I was their inspector, they painted the doors, the walls, everything. And when the lights, when they would lose power, if there was a fire or something like that, you can't tell the difference between the walls and the exit doors. So I made them paint all of the doors in a contrasting color, and they had to inform the students that they were not allowed to graffiti on the doors anymore. And we made sure that all the exits were clearly exits, not just one big looking wall. In stairways, we want to make sure that we know which level is the first level when there are basements. So this is barriers are not allowed except for this. This is the exception. Um, this barrier is keeping people that are coming down the stairs from going down thinking they're exiting and ending up in the basement. So see the one sign on the right picture, right bottom picture says not an exit. And that gate swings. It does swing both ways, but it it makes it clear that you are not supposed to go down if you're exiting, and you're supposed to, in the left-hand picture there, go out that door. And the people who are coming up, they have the option of going out the door that's to the right, or coming through the barrier and going out the door that's to the left. What we do also is we put signs on the doors that say first floor, so that people can see that and know that this is the floor that you exit. Stairways cannot be used for storage. So on the top right picture, some janitors didn't have a place for their break room, so they made one. They made it in the stairwell. So they put in a cooler, a microwave, refrigerator, a storage cabinet, and their water and their snacks. Not okay. No storage permitted in stairwells. It's going to impact people's ability to evacuate, but also our fire department operations. We use the stairwells to bring hose through and all sorts of things. Also, look at this picture on the bottom left. No storage under stairways because these things are all flammable. And notice there's a pressure washer that is a fuel-based pressure washer, and there's a parts cleaner. All of these things under there, they're not only flammable, they got flammable liquids in them. So if we had a fire, now the way to escape has radical fire underneath it, and you're trapped and you're not able to get out. We want to make sure there's no flammable materials on the walls in stairwells, and as minimal as possible in any hallway. So that's something we would point out. Remove the flammable materials from the stairwells and hallways, or minimize it. Let's move on to electrical hazards. This is a big deal. I want you to read that article by a Beverly Hills fire inspector who now is the deputy fire marshal for Long Beach Fire Department. But this picture is a great example. We've got extension cords plugged into extension cords that are plugged into computers or whatever. This is going to overload the system and can cause sparking and all sorts of issues that can lead to a fire. Worn equipment, due to lack of improper maintenance and improper use, can lead to electrical fires. So extension cords, when do we allow them to be used? They're supposed to be plugged in and used and then unplugged. Well, what about computers and all that stuff? If they use a GFI, a ground fault interrupter that has a circuit breaker and will trip when it's overloaded, we do allow that, and we allow that to be permanently plugged into them. But plugging a extension cord into another extension cord, that's called daisy chaining. And even if they're GFIs, we don't allow that. It overloads the system and it can cause electrical fires. So electrical cords can't go through the ceiling, can't go through walls. You cannot, here's the way the code says it, you cannot use extension cords in place of permanent wiring. They are for temporary use only. We want to make sure that electrical motors are free of oil, free of dirt. We want to make sure that exposed outlets have junction boxes over them. So I would point that out. Hey, you need a junction box over that. Some little kid comes along, sticks his finger in there to see what that is. Yow! So here's what the code says about extension cords. Temporary use, not to exceed 90 days. Used only with portable appliances. No daisy chaining. Grounded plugs need to use grounded outlets. Don't allow for spliced or damaged cords, and only one appliance per cord except with the GFIs. So here's an example of daisy chaining with GFIs. That's not okay, the bottom left picture. Look at what happened in the bottom right picture where a system was overloaded. The extension cord burned up and burned the computer, and fortunately it was caught and it would stayed a minor fire. But we want to prevent that from happening. Most of our fires in homes and in small businesses is because of this violation. So here's some more of the blah, blah, blah from the fire code. Not permanently affixed to a structure, not extended through walls, ceilings, or floors, not put under doors, not put under rugs, not put through walls, ceilings, floors, we already said that. Not in a location subject to damage. And multi-plug adapters are not supposed to be used unless it is the GFIs. There are other kinds of electrical hazards we want to be aware of. Power taps need to be plugged directly into a permanent receptacle. Okay, that's what we were talking about with extension cords, but also electrical rooms. We need 30 inches of clearance around the electrical panel because we might need to get to it, but also if there is any sparking, then flammable materials that are near it are going to catch fire. We want the access door properly labeled that the electrical panel is in there, and all of the switches should be properly labeled, and no tape on switches to keep them from breaking. Yeah, there's geniuses out there that they have a breaker that keeps throwing when they overload it. And so they say, you know what, this is really a pain in the neck. I'm going to tape it so it won't do that anymore, so I don't have to come in here and re-turn on that breaker. Yeah, that's asking for trouble. You're going to get a fire. So breaker and switch panels need to always be closed, properly labeled, and have 30 inches of clearance in front of them. Well, what about flammable liquids and compressed gases? They all need to be properly stored, and this is a flammable liquids cabinet. But if you were to really look at this, they just put every kind of hazardous material in a flammable liquids cabinet. So really what they've done here is they've made a bomb. They've put oxidizers in with their flammables and acids, all of this stuff in one cabinet. That's not the proper way to store it. So we want to watch for storage methods. And this is one of those areas where you might need a little bit more expertise. So if you come across something that doesn't look right, you check the code. And if you can't find the answer in the code, you call somebody in the Fire Prevention Bureau and ask for some help. We were out on an inspection in Castaic, and we went to this motorcycle supply place for, there's that motocross and open off-road vehicle place that's kind of where Ventura and Gorman meet. I'm forgetting the name of the place. But people on their way up would stop in Castaic and buy supplies. Well, we're walking around, and I saw that they had a big 55-gallon drum. They had told us that they weren't a hazmat handler, and I see this 55-gallon drum. I says, well, if you have a 55-gallon drum of something, you're a hazmat handler. And he says, well, first of all, it's never full. I said, it doesn't matter. You got a 55-gallon drum. We've got to consider it full. And then I said, what's in this drum? Is it oil? And he says, no, that's gasoline. In fact, it's the gasoline mix that a lot of motorcycles use that's a little bit, got a little more punch to it. So I said, you can't do that. And they had a hand pump, and people would bring their gas cans, and they would fill it up with a hand pump. and top it off for them. I said, I don't think you can do this. And my captain said, well, are you sure of that, Randy? And I said, no, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure. He says, well, we're going to get back to you. So we went and I looked it up in the code and I really couldn't find it. So then I called one of the guys in the hazmat unit and he said, absolutely, those guys should be hazmat handlers. And he said, and they can't do that. Give me the address. I'm going to go out there and inspect it. And the good news is now he's going to have to inspect it on an annual basis instead of us. So, we took care of it. It didn't look right. I wasn't exactly sure of what the code was on it, but we, followed our instincts, went with it, made the phone calls, and we got the right people there. We also need to make sure that they've got their safety data sheets. They used to be called material safety data sheets. Now they changed the name to SDS instead of MSDS. Well, another one of our common things, we're almost done here, is fire barriers. We need to make sure that the fire barriers are properly maintained. So when we have any kind of a break in a wall or a floor where it's supposed to be a fire rated barrier, we need to make sure that they're maintained properly. So you see that little hole, the pipe goes through there. It's kind of not got a lot, but there's enough room there for smoke and heat to get through. That needs to be properly sealed. I'll show you an example in a second. So we want to make sure the fire doors are not being propped open, that they are properly maintained, that they swing. They need to be automatic closing. Every fire door has to be automatic closing. We need to make sure that the fire windows are properly maintained, fire shutters, fire rated glass, all of that. We want to look for that. So here's a whole bunch of examples. Good on the left, bad on the right. So see that pipe going through the wall and coming up through the floor, properly sealed, properly, and the sealant just can't be some like Bondo kind of stuff or what they use with the drywall. All of a sudden I'm drawing a blank on what that stuff's called. It has to be a fire rated, it's a fire proof product. So the one on the right, that big gap allows for heat and smoke to go from one room to another. And that's all it takes sometimes for a fire to spread. So that needs to be sealed up. The bottom left picture is a great example of a properly done job where they've run the electrical conduit through a floor, but then they've properly sealed it all up. The bottom right picture is like a Costco, Walmart kind of place, and that's called a fire curtain. And a lot of times they cut through these, or smoke curtain. They cut through these, they run utilities through them. They just need to seal them up. The Costco in my neighborhood, they've got big, huge holes that they cut to run a bunch of stuff through it. And it breaks the integrity and purpose. This is to give people more time to evacuate. It slows the smoke and heat from going from one part of the building to the other part of the building, gives people more time. So we want to make sure that the integrity. Okay, last thing, cooking equipment. Well, second to last, we got some housekeeping. Cooking equipment. We want to make sure that it's properly cleaned and properly maintained. This is one of the only pieces of equipment that has to be maintained by a professional twice a year, every 6 months, biannual maintenance. So we want to check the little tag. It looks like the tags on fire extinguishers, and make sure that it's been maintained on a 6 months basis. Also, we want to look for grease. All of that grease is flammable, and when it builds up, that's bad news. Most places will take their filters out once a week, or a lot of places. I had a student who worked at Sharky's down the street from the school, and he said every night they take the filters out, they have a pressure washer, and they clean off the grease, and then they put the filters back. So we want to make sure that they're properly cleaning everyone. There are services that will come out and do this for them, and will maintain it. Okay, last two slides. Housekeeping. We've got oily rags. We want to make sure that they're put in the proper type of metal container. Combustibles near a heat source. We don't want any combustibles near electrical equipment or any heat source. We want to look for accumulation of trash and debris. Outside, if the building is close to a brush area, we want to have the 100-foot clearance of weeds, grass, and brush. And we want to make sure that they're not obstructing their sprinklers. So nothing should be within 18 inches of sprinklers. So if they've got high piled stock, it can't get close to the ceiling. 18 inches if it's sprinklers, 24 inches if there are no sprinklers of clearance from the ceiling. Here's another room at CalArts. And, you know, these are all artists, and they've got tons of stuff and things they're working on. And I lied a second ago. I said last 2 slides. This is the second to the last slide. There's 2 pictures. I'm sorry. But look at just, I mean, this is a fire load that's ridiculous. Too much paper, too much trash. I told them you got to clear some of this stuff out. Now, the next picture is on the other side of the same room. And I want you to notice something. Do you see any sprinklers in this part of the room? In the next one, there are sprinklers. That is not allowed by law to have a room that's partially protected by sprinklers and partially not. So they're in the process of having to add sprinklers to the rest of this building. It's kind of a weird deal, but they're forcing them to retroactively add sprinklers. But look at all that fire load. So this has got to get cleaned up. Too much mess. This mess is also going to cause problems getting out. There isn't adequate clearance in these aisles between the desks. So consider the fire load and the ignition sources. Look at the stuff hanging from the ceiling, not okay. And of course, you know, they're nice and warm there because on the wall opposite, they've got the sun. You know, it's going to keep them warm. But you know, what were they thinking when they put paper in the fluorescent light fixtures? Fluorescent lights run very hot, and they've taken paper because they want it to look all pretty and put it in right up against the bulbs. That's asking for a fire. I made them remove all of that. I made them remove the man hanging from the building and minimize the fire load in this room. Not okay. Clean it up. Okay, that's it. Those are your most common fire violations, fire and life safety violations on your everyday inspection. Watch for these things when you do your inspection of a business. These are the things you're going to see the most.